I mentioned media complicity with the idea of saying this. I want to just run through a few incidents in which the media was completely complicit with the American left's endless determination to paint America as a racist country. Endless determination. It is what the Democrats run on, is trying to gin up fear and doubt among American people about their neighbors, scare up a belief in that America is a deeply racist country, that you can barely get by in the morning. This country is so racist. And this is really what all the Democrats running for president are talking about, the way they depict and describe America. They plant the seeds that America is a terrible, awful, evil, racist place. They attribute racism as a motive to pretty much anything the conservative side stands for, whether you're talking about border security or building the wall or the tax structure or environmental law issues, regulations, pretty much any issue you can think of. Conservatives, Republicans have proposals, have ideas, and the answer of the leftists is to call the GOP racist. It is what their answer is to almost every issue. Just last week, AOC said in an interview that she feels sure that President Trump's determination to secure our border is rooted in racism. And now I want to get to the media's complicity and give you just a few examples. You may remember that when Joe Biden, Vice President Biden, announced his candidacy for the presidency, it was in April, I think. Yeah, like in April this year. He made his announcement for the presidency, and in that announcement, he said the reason he was running is because of what President Trump said about the riots in Charlottesville. Let me remind you, in Charlottesville, the battle was about whether or not to remove a Civil War era statue. There are people in America who think that all statues that in any way honor the Confederacy, the southern side of the Civil War, should be removed from public eye, should never be allowed to be there. That's the remove people. And then there are people who say, no, we have a lot of reasons that we should keep our history intact, keep our monuments intact. We should keep these intact because we don't destroy our history. That's what totalitarians do. Frankly, it's what radical Muslims do. We don't do that here. We keep our statues in place. So it was a very raucous protest in Charlottesville over whether we kept that statue or we got rid of it. There was one or more white supremacist groups who showed up at that rally. And so it was a very ugly rally, and it ended up in violence, and one woman, very unfortunately, was killed. So in the aftermath, President Trump, in making reference to that there are two sides of the question of whether or not we should remove Civil War statues, whether or not we should do that, President Trump said there are fine people on both sides of the debate. Fine people who agree we should keep the statues up, fine people who think we should take them down. He never, ever, ever, ever called the white supremacists fine people. But when Joe Biden announced his candidacy for the presidency, he actually said he was running because President Trump called white supremacists fine people. Now, I want to play just one clip for you from President Trump relating to Charlottesville. This is one of many examples of times he clarified, he pointed out, he said again, he never called the supremacists fine people. But here we go with clip 2 of President Trump, if we have him.
Based on the events that took place over the weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia, I would like to provide the nation with an update on the ongoing federal response to the horrific attack and violence that was witnessed by everyone. I just met with FBI Director Christopher Wray and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The Department of Justice has opened a civil rights investigation into the deadly car attack that killed one innocent American and wounded 20 others. To anyone who acted criminally in this weekend's racist violence, you will be held fully accountable. Justice will be delivered. As I said on Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. And as I have said many times before, no matter the color of our skin, we all live under the same laws. We all salute the same great flag. And we are all made by the same Almighty God. We must love each other, show affection for each other, and unite together in condemnation of hatred, bigotry, and violence. We must rediscover the bonds of love and loyalty that bring us together as Americans. Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. We are a nation founded on the truth that all of us are created equal. We are equal in the eyes of our Creator. We are equal under the law, and we are equal under our Constitution.
The reason I wanted to play that is this. That was not the only time in which President Trump clearly, unequivocally denounced racism, denounced white supremacism, and I could read you all the other times, but I don't want to take up time in the show to do that. But the point is, when Joe Biden made an announcement to run for the presidency in April of 2019, April this year, and he said President Trump called the white supremacists fine people, I cannot point you to one mainstream media outlet that called out Biden for that lie. Biden didn't slightly massage the truth. He didn't slightly misstate. He bold-faced lied to the American people, to you and to everyone listening to his announcement, in claiming that Trump said that the white supremacists were fine people. But the point in this show today, talking about what happened over the weekend, killings, this is media is profoundly complicit in what racial tension exists in our country, profoundly complicit in the effort of the American left to turn Americans against each other, to create a racist society, to create racial tension, to encourage people to be suspicious of each other. The left generates racism. They create racism by lies. So back to Biden, not one media outlet said President Joe Biden, who announced his candidacy for the presidency, with a lie. I want you to think about this example. First of all, when Richard Nixon's name is ever mentioned forever and all time, the media will say Richard Nixon, who resigned in disgrace, because he did. Okay, so they want to tag that with him. Biden should have been tagged with Biden, who announced his candidacy based on a lie. Biden, who lied when he announced his candidacy. But the Biden lie of trying to plant the idea of Americans that Trump is a racist, that lie was okay with the media. They were fine with it. They had no effort, no willingness, no desire whatsoever to correct that, to point out Biden lied. A similar one, I talk about the media's complicity. You remember back in the Obama era when we had the most unfortunate incident, Michael Brown was killed by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri in August of 2014. If you watch my show, you know, in fact, you can go back and watch this show. It was in January of this year. I don't know the date, maybe January 23rd, but January of this year, we ran this more detailed story. Michael Brown, and I am sorry for any young person to lose their life. I'm sorry a police officer ever ends up killing a civilian. I want our police officers to be safe. I want our civilians to be safe. But in the Michael Brown case, there was a witness at the hearing in Ferguson, at the hearing at the grand jury, a woman who is Black. She's from Missouri. She was an eyewitness to the shooting. She was sitting in the passenger seat of a van which was stopped. She saw the whole thing. This Black woman, her name was Sierra Jenkins, I'm pretty sure. She testified to the grand jury that Michael Brown was charging the officer. And in her words, that officer had no choice. She said, this woman telling the grand jury, Michael Brown never stopped charging the officer. He never stopped. He never put his hands up. He never said, don't shoot. You have to realize the significance of that. Michael Brown never put his hands up, and he never said don't shoot. This is the reason the grand jury did not come back with an indictment against the officer. This is the reason the further investigation at the federal level resulted in the same outcome. Because the fact was, whether Michael Brown was a terrible guy, whatever you think about Michael Brown and his whole family or anything else about Ferguson, Missouri, in that instant, in that time when the officer had already been punched once by Michael Brown that day, and he's being charged by a very large young man. Michael Brown was a big man, a big, nearly grown man, charging this officer who already knew he was violent because he'd been punched by him already. The officer's yelling, stop, 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 stop. And Michael Brown charged him, never put his hands up, never said don't shoot. And yet you ask 25 people today, how many of you know that that's the case? How many people in America know that Michael Brown never put his hands up and never said don't shoot? And the reason that matters is this: that incident, along with a few others, was a major effort by the American left to attack police, to paint police as racist, to paint Republicans as racist. They weren't really involved in it at all. And it is one of the major instances in which we've suffered in the last decade or more with the fear and concern about our country that America has racism, has a huge problem, that we have to resolve it, that we had a poor kid who hadn't done anything wrong and he was just shot even after he stopped and put his hands up and he was obviously surrendering. And it wasn't true. Ask yourself, how many, all the times you hear Michael Brown and hands up, don't shoot, how many in the mainstream media point this out? Actually, Michael Brown never said don't shoot. Michael Brown never stopped charging the officer. Michael Brown never put his hands up. How many people know that? How many people in the media ever point that out? And it matters. Facts matter. Truth matters. But in the era of Obama, President Obama never, ever had the integrity to say to the American people, look, people, I still think that, I still think we have a problem with the police in this country. I still think we have to do some investigating and soul searching and policy changing and, looking inside police departments. But in this case, the fact is, Michael Brown never stopped charging, never put his hands up, never said don't shoot. That would have been incumbent on an honest president. It was incumbent on President Obama to raise that. He didn't do it. He let the nation marinate in the outrage and the upset and the anger that was the aftermath of the Michael Brown incident, never ever having the moral courage to stand up and say the truth. And frankly, neither did the media. So back to media complicity and the way this country is painted and the way that this whole white supremacist narrative has been pushed forward. Think of the difference in the American population if everyone knew, well, actually Michael Brown, that's not what happened. I mean, he didn't put his hands up and say don't shoot, shot while he was surrendering. Imagine the difference in the narrative. The left benefits from the narrative of convincing America we have a deeply racist country. President Obama played along with that narrative. He wouldn't tell the truth, and neither would the media. If you go back to my show, again, I think it was January 23rd, you can look back at old shows. We talk about the Michael Brown case. You can actually go to a play that was put on. A play was created where actors simply read the exact words of the witnesses to the grand jury hearing. You can actually read what the grand jury heard, because even the grand jury outcome was criticized by the left as racist. Oh, they're fine letting this kid go, letting this cop go. Of course they had to acquit him once they hear that. Okay, I digress, but there are a whole bunch of other ones of these big problems with the media not wanting to tell the truth, not wanting and kind of perpetuating the narrative, never speaking up and saying the true narrative about Charlottesville, and never pointing out Trump never said that the supremacists were fine people. Biden never being corrected. The media is complicit in what the left is doing on these issues, and it is extraordinarily harmful to our great country.